My name is Christer Skalberg. I've been with Qlik since 2010, December actually, so I'm just celebrated my 7th year anniversary at Qlik. And I'm working as a Senior Rapid Response Engineer and Escalation Manager at Qlik Support. My specialities are primarily QlikView Server and Publisher still, and I'm also heavily focused on infrastructure and enterprise setup, so anything large scale or complex or performance related, that's where you'll find me doing technical enablement, among other things. And today we're going to talk about QlikView, the November 2017 release, and what that means in the form of improvements that goes towards stabilizing and reinforcing the stability of QlikView. We're going to talk about some new features made into this release. We're going to talk about some new functionality in the core product that supports stability in the enterprise. We're going to talk briefly about upgrading from 11.20 to 12.x, so anything related later than 12.10 or the November release, and how it behaves slightly different than it did before. We're going to talk about news in QlikView Publisher and some new boundaries that we have found and become aware of that are important to your environments. And we're going to try to summarize everything when we're done. First of all, you might have noticed that QlikView is no longer named QlikView 12.something. It's now called QlikView November 2017. So a new naming convention has gone into place with all our products. So we are naming all our products with the product and what month they are released in, and that denotes a major release. So we're doing the same thing for Qlik Sense, for example. We're doing the same thing for Qlik N Printing. They all share the same naming convention, and we are aligning QlikView to that as well. New and introduced in this release, the November release, is also that we are doing license validation when you do an upgrade. It's always been a fact that when you upgrade to a new major release of QlikView, we have checked that you are entitled to that upgrade by validating that you have a valid maintenance agreement on your server and in your license. We are now doing that for SR, service release upgrades as well. So even if you are entitled to upgrade to the November release and then your license expires at the end of the year, you choose not to prolong or extend your maintenance agreement, that will also actively block you from upgrading to a later service release that is released after the end of your maintenance agreement. The QlikView November 2017 release builds heavily on the new architecture that was introduced in 12.10, where we have redone and reworked lots of the underlying core functionality in QlikView. And it also sends a very loud message that QlikView is very much still an alive product. We have seen comments about us focusing very heavily on Qlik Sense and how that might have given the impression that QlikView is a dying product, but it's very much not so. We are committed to continue development and future feature improvements for QlikView as well. So it's very much still a live product and still something that is being built on. There are some new features that went into QlikView November 2017. One of them is something called analytic connections that we now support, which is effectively a server-side extension. You can now build objects outside of QlikView and connect to them and use extensions that sit outside of our own engine to render or to calculate objects and pull them back into QlikView and display them for your end users. Something that has been, we are a bit late on this one, I'll freely admit, is that we now are supporting, when you do a send to Excel export, we're now supporting sending to XLSX as well, so we're supporting the current Office versions. And QlikView November 2017 also supports KML, loading geographical data into QlikView documents as, for example, coordinates for a map or something like that. So we are that's a new feature that went in as well. Another big change that, since we're supposed to talk about how we are making sure that the product is the best it's ever been and the most stable it has ever been. Something that has been a plague for QlikView for a while, and it's been something that we have been addressing previously as well, is the shared file. The shared file is effectively a file that sits next to your QlikView document on disk, and that keeps a record of everything that is being created for a user that is navigating your end user documents. So, for example, it records your session state so that a user can leave their QlikView document, come back, and return to the document where they left off. They can also create bookmarks, server-side bookmarks that sits in the file on the server and are loaded with the document so that they are always available on the server. And they also contain user objects. Anything a user adds to a QlikView document, as in their own charts or objects or anything of that kind, is also kept in a shared file. That means that these files have been very intensely used for a very long time. It's where we keep, and the usage goes up as your deployment grows and your end user base grows. And this has made them a weak point. So what we're introducing in the QlikView November 2017 release is a new shared file format called Tshirt, which effectively is a transactional shared file. This gives us new functionality that we have been looking for a long time and want to bring to you, so that because it improves stability and it gives us more flexibility in working with the shared files. So, for example, this means that a change is never done in place. It's done in a journal so that it can then be written back to the shared file. So it's effectively making the shared file going from a flat file on disk into more like a database-like structure, which means that it secures the product highly. And we are able to do transactional-based writing to them. And this gives us the ability to fail and retry writes to shared file as well. So we are way more resilient to any kind of disruption in your QlikView environment with this functionality. And we use Windows functionality to enable all of this. So it's still a single file on disk, but the functionality is that of more of a database. This means that the new shared file that sits on your file system right next to the document is now called .tshirt. The old formats are still supported, so when you upgrade your environment from any previous release of QlikView, you will not automatically get a converted shared file in place. It can still work with the old file formats until the point where you decide to move it over, convert it to a new Tshirt file. But any new document that is loaded onto the QlikView server and a user is opening it will create the new format in any new shared file that is being created. So any document that has never been opened in an older release, only opened in a new release, will get the new Tshirt file format. It's entirely possible to control how this behaves. You can actually set it in the settings.ini file for the QVS if you, for some reason, would want to work with the old format for any reason. That's fully configurable. You can change it in the settings.ini file for the QlikView server service. We have also expanded the capabilities of the shared file cleaning tool. That it's a part of the QlikView server exe functionality since way back in QlikView 11.20. So instead of using any power tool or any other tool to clean up and maintain your shared files, that functionality is now integrated into QlikView server service and can be used. And it can also be used to convert your shared files from the old to the new format for any old documents that have been migrated. And speaking of the power tools, the shared file viewer that's been available on our community as part of our power tools package currently cannot open the Tshirt files. It's a legacy. That one is restricted to the legacy and old format at this point. But the meta file that also sits right next to your document in a QlikView server deployment still uses the old file format, so there are no changes to the meta file, which means that that one might still be suffering from corruption in the odd case. We've seen this happen very rarely, but we're working on that one as well. So what you will see on your file system is effectively this. You will see that a document that was done in 12.10 has a .shared file that has the name .shared, while a document that was opened in the new November release is just named .tshared. So it's the new file format and the old file format. So they're immediately visible on disk. The help page for QlikView on our help pages contain a full description on how to use the cleaning, the file share, or the share file cleaning tool, and how you can convert your old .shared files into the new format, if you so wish. It also contains a bit of other new functionality that has gone into the integrated shared file cleaning tool. For example, the possibilities to load a list of users and remove all objects for those users from the shared file. So you can do more active maintenance on your shared file using the built-in capabilities of the QlikView server.exe file. And there is a very good help page, as mentioned, on our help page, if you want to read up on it. So this the new shared file format makes a great contribution towards making QlikView server more resilient to file corruption or to losing, for example, bookmarks and that would not appear for a user. So it takes a great stride into make it even more stable than it's been before. Another change that affects that comes with the November release is the BNF Script Evaluator. BNF type script evaluation has been a part of Qlik Sense since the June release of Sense, but it's now making its way into QlikView as well. So we're using a strict BNF Script Evaluator whenever we evaluate the load scripts of your documents. This has been a part of the QlikView desktop for a while, but now it also makes its way into the server. So they're using the same script evaluator in QlikView desktop and in QlikView server. This means that when we evaluate and we execute a load script, we are a bit stricter on how it should be formed. So we are a bit less forgiving for script errors. Scripts that ran well and were more forgiving in 11.20 or 12.10 might now fail for you when you're running them in the November release. And for that reason, so it would only highlight to you that there is something flawed with this script. It could need an update, or it needs to be reviewed. But you can, if you have upgraded and you have tasks that are failing, you can disable the BNF load script evaluator on document or on server level. So for doing it for the entire server, you can effectively make a change to your settings.ini file for the qvb.exe, the QlikView reload engine, and you can enter that into so that you can disable BNF script evaluation on server level, or if you only have a few scripts that are failing and want them to continue working while you are redoing your load scripts, you can disable them on document level. So you would have to enter this tag, BNF tag, to the top of the script. And this is all documented and available from Qlik support or in the release notes. So all of this is covered. But it's something to be aware of when you're doing an upgrade, that scripts that were executing perfectly fine in an older release might now fail in the November release, and it might be due to the fact that they actually do contain an error that is now causing them to fail. I will also touch base briefly on QlikView Publisher and how it behaves these days as compared to primarily as compared to 11.20 and QlikView 12.0, because the QlikView Publisher was completely redesigned and restructured with the introduction of QlikView 12.10, and the same functionality is in the November release. Because these are very good changes, because they're making Publisher more configurable and more stable, and more you can do more with the Publisher, and it's able to protect itself from overload, for example. So one of the things that we did introduce was QlikView Distribution Service Publisher groups, where if you have more than one QlikView Publisher in a cluster, you can now separate them into publisher group and designate tasks to run on a specific server. So a very heavy task, for example, you might want to dedicate that to run on your bigger or more massive QlikView Publisher server, so that it gets the resources it needs to execute in the fastest way possible. And you can apply different settings per distribution server group, so that you can have a different amount of allowed reload engines, for example, per distribution group. And you can also work with dedicated tasks, or prioritized tasks that are supposed to be run alone on the server. If you have something that is highly critical to be done at a specific time, you can say that this task is a dedicated task. I want it to be run separately on the machine. No other tasks are allowed to run at the same time to interfere with this particular reload task. So that's new functionality that went into QlikView 12.10, and it's also in the November release. And it makes a difference on how you can configure your environment. Something that makes a difference in how your publisher environment will behave under load is a newly introduced overload protection mechanism, where the QlikView distribution service will be aware of how heavily loaded the server is, and it will actually stop launching more tasks if it determines that it's already in an overloaded or in a heavily loaded state. So by default, if you are running at 90% memory utilization on your server or higher, or if you're running on 75% CPU utilization or higher on your server, you might still have lots of free reload engines. You might only be running a few tasks, but they are heavy and intense. We will not launch any more tasks. We'll still trigger them, but they will end up in a state called queued, and they will be run when the server goes back down to or backs out of an overloaded state. So this enables a QlikView Publisher server to protect itself from full saturation of the utilization of resources. Because a server that is running at 100% CPU utilization for a long time, we know will start to introduce lots of reload failures, and that's something that we want to avoid if at all possible. So by default, we're not launching any more tasks if the server is already running hot. And we also in 12.10 and onwards have a new notification system going into the management system in the background of QlikView. So when you run a task and it wants to update your task result files, for example, or display, hey, I'm done with this task, what should I run next? We have completely redone that notification system. So for example, in this case, it's just that this list is found on the help site for publisher groups as well. It just displays how many tasks will be run at the same time if you have set up your distribution groups to run dedicated tasks. The notification system that went into place in QlikView 12.10 and onwards also means that the notification system in itself and QlikView, both QlikView and QlikView Publisher, is now a bit heavier on disk access. So something that we have come to realize, and something that is becoming a new boundary for how hard you can push your environment, is file access times on your file system. So if you're running a big and distributed QlikView environment, for example, and you have a publisher cluster and a QlikView cluster, and they're all working towards the same network share, a shared folder structure on a Windows machine. We now know that the availability of that Windows share is now becoming more critical because we are using the files more often. We're updating more files in parallel, and that causes a new bottleneck. If you have a slow system, slow file share, for example, if you have a small virtual machine holding your Windows file shares for your QlikView deployment, we know that virtual machine, for example, can now become a bottleneck that will kill your real efficiency, and it will start to introduce problems way earlier than it did before in 1120. This is not necessarily something that is bad. It's highlighting a fact that the file server is not really up to the load that the rest of the system can put on it, because the entire product has now been optimized to the point where we are extremely good at running tasks in parallel. We are extremely good at utilizing resources on a machine. And the file share needs to be up to speed to be able to match that performance in the rest of the product. So this is something that is normally easily overcome by adding more resources to your file share, or by splitting your file share so that you have in a publisher environment, for example, so that you have your source documents and your user documents on different disks even. That normally overcomes these problems. And they're just, the problems that arise are just highlighting a latency in the file system that is limiting QlikView. So to summarize what has been a fairly quick and easy session, just going over the top improvements that goes into QlikView and how it helps stabilizing the entire product. Most important message, QlikView is still very much alive. It's a product that is being maintained. We are enriching it with more features as we go along. We are already in the process of building the next generation of the product, and it will be around for the foreseeable future. QlikView November 2017 is built for stability. It introduces a relatively low number of new features, but it enables a lot of new functionality in the background that will help to make your QlikView deployment way more resilient than it has been before. The new shared file format, Tshirt, will help stabilize your shared file usage. The new overload protection in Publisher will help stabilize Publisher so that it doesn't run itself into the ground by overloading the system. But we know that file storage availability and that its low latency is now more important than it has been before, because of the rest of the product has been optimized to run as smoothly as possible. It requires a higher availability of the controlling files in the background. And that kind of summarizes what I had on my schedule. So I'll try and switch over to the Q&A panel.
So now it's time for questions and answers. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A panel at the bottom right corner of your WebEx console. And Christopher will try to get to them as many as he can.
We have a question about seeing the size of an export of data that was into Excel. We cannot see that from the server side on how big a file was that was exported, but we can see the action in the audit log. When someone is doing a send to Excel, we will see what selections they made prior to that, or what bookmarks they applied, and then they did an export. The file size will be, since the Excel file will end up on the end user's computer, it's hard for us to see that from the server side. It might be a good feature improvement though, so I'll take that one back to product management. And related to that, it was a question if we can restrict how much data is being sent to Excel. You should be able to completely restrict the function in sending or in exporting data, but limiting on size level, there is no such feature at this time. So we can't say you're allowed to export this much, but not something else. We have a question regarding effectively document administrators and them being alerted when one of their jobs fails. That should be integrated, and you will now get a code snippet of the log that's being generated for a failed task will be sent with alert email. There is also a new feature that went into 12.10, the November release, where it will now actually display the script log in the QMC. Previously, you could see the task execution history, and you could see the task log for how the job went. It will now also load the actual script log for that job in the QMC. So from your QMC, that will now be your one-stop shop for diagnosing either a script failure or a task failure. It will show you all of those log files in the same place. I got a question regarding the upgrade path from a previous release. In this case, we have a question how to upgrade from 11.20 and what path to follow. Worth mentioning in this session is actually that for your awareness, QlikView 11.20 is actually coming to end of life for support at the beginning of the next year. So it's a product that will no longer be supported from mid-March of 2018. It's also a quite old product, since we have after 11.20 we have 3 major releases. So 11.20 has been a product that's been with us for a very long time. It's been a very good product, and it's extremely stable in the latest service releases. But now we're coming up to the end of life for it. So the upgrade path from 11.20 to the November release is actually extremely straightforward, because you can do a direct upgrade. There are no major architectural changes that will affect or make you do a step-by-step upgrade. So you can do an upgrade straight from 11.20, and we have been testing this with the most major SR versions of 11.20. The one that is primarily used in the field right now is SR12 of 11.20. It's the most dominant one, and we have done a lot of upgrade testing directly from 11.20 SR12 up to the November release, and it works without the problem. So it's just a straight upgrade.
I'd like to add to that we had an STT in February by Brett Blees on that subject, and he goes through the details of troubleshooting an upgrade from QlikView, a previous version of QlikView, to 12.10. So a major release upgrade, and that still is very applicable. If you need some more detail on that, just look at our STT archive, our previous recordings, and you'll be able to find that one.
Thank you, Troy, for adding that. We got a question about, since I spoke briefly about the power tools and the shared file cleaner specifically, that has been on the community for a very long time and has allowed you to work with the QlikView controlling files. We got a question if they support the new November release, and at this point they don't. Most of them will still work, but the November release is not supported by the current version of the power tools. We are, however, working on them. But since it's not a supported product, it might take a while before the new version comes out of the power tools and the shared file cleaner, for example. We got a question about improvements for the QMC. I mentioned it already in the task history field for looking at your tasks, and you could previously see task history, so you could see the execution history. You could also see the task log in itself loaded by which job that ran. We have now added the same functionality for the actual script log for that reload. So they're all collected in the QMC, so you don't have to navigate into the folder structure to find the script log if the script failed in a publisher in a reload task. We got a question regarding storage on if there's documented anywhere, and yes, they are in the help in the online help for QlikView. We do have notions on what types of storage is supported by QlikView, and we have notes about how, if you're running publisher, you should split your user and your source document on different SAN drives, if you're using SAN drives, for example. So you want them on different disks even. This is all documented in the online help. I got a question if there are size limits to QVD or QVV files. And no, there are no restrictions on how big a QlikView document or a QVD data file can be. There are, however, very practical limitations since a QlikView document is a file that's on disk, is compressed, but it then expands into memory. So we normally start looking at file size when you go 10, 15, 20 gigabytes on raw file size, because that will be a file that will take a very long time to open in QlikView Server or in QlikView Desktop, and it will consume huge amounts of memory. It might expand tenfold into memory or even more. So a file that is 20 gigs on disk will expand into possibly 200 gigs in memory and might bring down a server if you try to open it. So it's more along those lines where your limitations are. And it's something that we heavily focus on when we are doing a document health check. We're looking at document size. If we see very big documents, we typically recommend to start looking at splitting those documents into smaller documents and do document chaining, for example, to access them in separate documents instead of having all your data in one document, just because it gives you a much better end user responsiveness.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you to Krister for presenting. We always appreciate getting experts like Krister to share with us. We've got a legal disclaimer here for you and a thank you page after that. So thanks again once again. Have a great rest of your day and a great holiday season.